The day my father's will was read, my heart felt like it was pounding through my ribs. I sat in a quiet, solemn office, the air thick with polished wood scent and the weight of finality. My father, Michael Harper, had amassed a fortune worth nearly $40 million, and with his passing, I assumed, naively, that a fragment of his legacy would be mine. But even before the lawyer opened the folder resting before him, my stepmother, Vanessa, leaned toward me with a smile sharper than broken glass. She whispered, low enough for only me to hear, "Don't expect a cent, Ethan. Your father and I discussed everything. The entire estate is mine." Her words struck me so hard it felt like the room lurched. Vanessa had spent years treating me as if I were an intruder in my own father's home. And now, seated at that long mahogany table with my Uncle Robert beside me, she looked as if she were sitting on a throne, waiting for the moment I shattered. With her legs crossed and her posture loose and elegant, she watched me like someone waiting for a final victory she had already secured. I forced my hands to stay still beneath the table, fingers curling so tightly that my knuckles whitened. My mother, Karen, sat 2 seats away, her jaw tight, her gaze burning. She had protected me from Vanessa's cruelty for years, but in this room filled with legal documents and signatures, there was nothing she could do. The reading of the will would determine the rest of my life. The lawyer, Daniel, a tall, soft-spoken man with glasses balanced at the tip of his nose, began to read, his voice steady and controlled. Every syllable echoed through the quiet room, and with each line, Vanessa's smile stretched a little wider. She was reveling in it, reveling in the moment she believed would erase me entirely. But then he reached a line that froze her smile in place, wiping it clean off her face like rain washing away chalk. And for the first time since I walked into that office, I felt the smallest breath of relief. That morning had been excruciating. Wearing the black suit that felt too heavy, carrying the grief of losing my father, I had walked into that law office wondering how the pieces of his empire would be divided. My father was gone. The man who taught me resilience, who built an empire brick by painstaking brick, who carved success out of relentless determination, was no longer beside me. And yet, as I sat in that stiff chair, I felt as though I was standing at the edge of losing him again. The office itself was the kind of place where wealthy families had their futures determined. Polished wooden shelves lined with books, the air old and formal. Heavy curtains filtered the daylight so that everything felt dimmed and muted, like a funeral's afterimage. Uncle Robert sat at my side. He wasn't wealthy like my father, but he carried a sort of quiet dignity that money couldn't buy. He had always reminded me of my father's early struggles, of Michael Harper's grit long before the money came. Those stories shaped me as much as anything my father taught me directly. And across from us was Vanessa. She looked like a woman attending a gala, not a widow at a will reading. Her dress was elegant, her hair pinned perfectly, her expression untouched by sorrow. She didn't come to mourn, she came to collect. Ever since she entered my father's life when I was 15, she treated me like an unwanted reminder of a past she wished he never had. She was beautiful, sharp and cold, a woman who understood exactly how much influence she held. She would look at the clothes my mother bought me and scoff. She would shut down my voice at dinner as if I were a background noise. And when my father wasn't present, she whispered venom with surgical precision. "One day, it will all be mine, and you'll have nothing." I had spent years pretending it didn't matter, telling myself that my father saw through it. Sometimes he did. He'd pull me aside during visits and reassure me, telling me never to forget that I was his son, that I had strength inside me that no one could take from me. You carry my blood, Ethan. That alone is worth more than anything she can try to take from you. Those words were the rope I held on to through every insult Vanessa threw at me. But now, sitting in that office, waiting for Daniel the lawyer to flip the pages that carried my father's final words, I didn't know whether to brace for betrayal or hope. Was my father the man who believed in me, or the husband who surrendered every room to Vanessa? My mother's presence helped me stay composed. She didn't have any legal claim in this room, but she refused to let me go through this alone. Her gaze never left Vanessa, sharp, fierce, protective. When Daniel began to read the will, his voice was calm, but each word felt like a stone dropping into water. He listed donations to various charities, small gifts to distant relatives, and then shifted to major assets. With every property, account, or estate placed in Vanessa's column, her confidence swelled. She didn't bother hiding it. She angled her body slightly toward me as if savoring my discomfort. When the lawyer named the California vacation home, she smirked. When he mentioned the vineyard, she smiled fully. When he allocated my father's art collection to her, single statement cracked something inside me. 3 months ago. 3 months ago, my father had called me unexpectedly. 3 months ago, he asked about my goals, my plans. 3 months ago, he sounded regretful, almost nostalgic. 3 months ago, he said, "We'll talk soon. I've been thinking about making things right." Vanessa didn't know that. Her smile stayed, but mine faltered. Because suddenly, everything felt uncertain again. My father had changed his will at the very end, and none of us knew what was coming next. I turned my head slightly and caught my mother's eyes. She gave me a look that said, "No matter what happens, you are not alone." For a second, the pressure eased, but Vanessa would not let me breathe. She leaned in closer, her voice a snake's hiss. "Do you see now? He chose me. He trusted me, not you. You were just his practice family, and now it is my turn to carry his name." Her words cut deep, sharper than anything she had ever said before. My fists curled under the table. I wanted to shout at her, to tear her smile apart with every ounce of anger I had buried for years. But Uncle Robert placed his hand on my arm, firm and steady. His voice was a whisper, low enough that only I could hear. "Hold yourself together, Ethan. Your father was not blind." Those words struck differently. My father was not blind. He saw through people better than anyone I had ever known. He had once told me that wealth reveals true character, that when money is on the line, you learn who someone really is. I wondered if this moment was exactly what he had prepared me for. Still, the minutes dragged like hours. Daniel's voice continued announcing allocations of stock portfolios, investment accounts, and corporate holdings. Vanessa's breathing grew lighter, almost like she was savoring the music of it. My chest grew heavier with every detail. It felt like being buried alive under the weight of my father's empire, each asset another shovel of dirt. Finally, Vanessa leaned back and spoke openly, her voice clear. "I told you, Ethan. My father trusted me with everything. You should find peace in that. He knew you were not ready." My mother's face hardened, and for a moment I thought she might snap back at her, but she held her tongue. Uncle Robert kept his hand firm on my arm. I understood then why he had come. He knew Vanessa would twist the knife at every chance, and I knew I would need strength not to collapse. The conflict was no longer just about inheritance. It was about my father's final judgment of me, whether he believed in the son he raised or the woman who married him. And in that room, with Vanessa's smug grin and the lawyer's steady voice, I felt myself teetering on the edge of despair.
The lawyer shifted in his seat, eyes scanning the final page. He looked up, his face unreadable, and for the first time since the reading began, Vanessa's smile flickered. It was brief, but I caught it. A shadow of doubt crossed her face. I straightened in my chair, my heart pounding as the tension in the room sharpened like a blade. Something was about to happen, and for the first time since I walked into that office, I let myself hope. The air in the room had grown heavy, thick with silence between the lawyer's words. Every sentence that had already been read clung to me like chains, pulling me deeper into the fear that my father had truly left me nothing. Across the table, Vanessa's confidence poured off her like perfume, overwhelming and suffocating. She sat with her legs crossed, one hand resting delicately on the arm of the chair, her smile unbroken. She believed the game was won, but then the lawyer shifted, sliding a fresh page out of the folder. His expression changed ever so slightly, a tightening around the mouth, a subtle flick of the eyes toward me before returning to the document. It was the smallest crack in the monotony, but it was enough for me to sit taller. Vanessa noticed too, and for the first time that morning, her smile faltered. My chest tightened with a strange mix of dread and hope. I wanted to believe my father had not abandoned me, but years of Vanessa's words echoed in my mind. She had told me so many times that he trusted her, that I was forgotten, that I was irrelevant. I could hear her voice even now whispering that I did not matter. And yet in that moment I made a decision. I would not crumble under her gaze. Whether I received nothing or everything, I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. My father's last lesson to me was about resilience. I remembered his exact words from a conversation years ago when I was struggling in school. "Ethan, the world will look for ways to humiliate you. Don't hand it to them. Stand tall even if you are standing with nothing." I uncrossed my arms, sat upright, and forced myself to hold my stepmother's gaze. Her smirk twitched when she realized I was no longer shrinking. For the first time that day, she looked at me with a trace of irritation, as if my refusal to collapse was an insult to her victory. Uncle Robert leaned closer and murmured, "That's it. Don't let her win before you've even heard the last word." His voice was low and calm, but firm enough to anchor me. The lawyer continued reading, his voice steady. "To my wife, Vanessa Harper, I leave the household we shared, along with a lifetime allowance of $160,000 annually to be distributed from the estate's trust." The words hit the table like a thunderclap. Vanessa's smile froze. She blinked, her hand tightening on the arm of the chair. She had been expecting numbers in the millions, not a yearly allowance smaller than a single month of my father's income. For a flicker of a moment, her mask cracked, and I saw something raw beneath it. Fear. She quickly composed herself, brushing a strand of hair from her face, but the damage was done. She no longer looked so certain.
The lawyer paused briefly, allowing the weight of his words to settle before turning to the next page. My pulse hammered in my ears. My mother's eyes lit with a sharp gleam, as if she knew what was about to come. Uncle Robert gave my shoulder a firm squeeze, almost like he had been expecting this outcome all along. Vanessa's voice cut through the silence, sharp and brittle. "This cannot be right. My husband would never limit me to an allowance. He trusted me with everything." The lawyer did not flinch. "Mrs. Harper, I assure you, these are Mr. Harper's final instructions, signed and witnessed legally 3 months prior to his passing." Her jaw tightened, but she forced a laugh that sounded hollow. Of course. I am certain the bulk of the estate is still addressed to me. Michael always said he wanted me to be secure." I stayed quiet, though inside my chest burned. Her confidence was unraveling, and I could feel the shift in the air. For years she had told me I was nothing, that she was everything. And now, with each word the lawyer read, her foundation was cracking. In that moment, I chose not to hide anymore. I leaned forward,
my voice calm but clear. "Funny, Vanessa. I don't recall my father ever saying he built his empire for you. He built it for his family." Her head snapped toward me, eyes flashing. "You think you know what he wanted?" she spat. "You were a child when he made his decisions. You don't understand the man he became." I did not raise my voice. I met her glare head-on and said, "I know the man who raised me, and he never turned his back on his son." The lawyer cleared his throat to continue. But in that exchange, something important had shifted. Vanessa was rattled, no longer untouchable. For years she had thrived on my silence, my hesitation, my fear. By speaking, by refusing to bend, I had taken something back from her. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and prepared to read the final clause. My chest swelled with anticipation and dread all at once. I could feel that everything was building toward this moment, the decision my father had left behind, the judgment he had made, not just of Vanessa, but of me. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, the smugness drained from her face. She sat forward now, her hands clasped tightly together, her nails digging into her palms. She no longer looked like the woman who had walked into this room, certain of her power. She looked like someone who feared losing everything. My mother's hand brushed against mine, a quiet reminder that she was still with me, no matter what happened. Uncle Robert gave me a slight nod, his lips pressing into the hint of a smile. He knew, somehow he had always known, my father would not leave me behind. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. Whether the next sentence confirmed Vanessa's smug prophecy or revealed something entirely different, I was ready to face it without fear. I would not be the boy Vanessa had spent years mocking. I would be the man my father raised, the man who could stand tall even in the face of betrayal. The lawyer lifted his eyes, his voice firm, as he began to read the final words of the will. The entire room leaned forward, waiting for the verdict that would decide everything. The room was silent as the lawyer looked down at the final page of the will. His fingers pressed lightly against the paper, his voice steady, but carrying a weight that pulled every eye toward him. I could hear nothing but the thudding of my heart. Vanessa sat stiffly, her confident posture gone, her hands now clenched tightly in her lap. The lawyer began to read. "To my beloved wife, Vanessa Harper, I leave the comfort of our shared home and a lifetime allowance of $160,000 a year. This is to ensure she will never want for necessities or comforts." Vanessa's lips parted, her face blanching. She opened her mouth to protest, but the lawyer raised his voice just slightly, continuing without pause. "The entirety of my estate, including all real estate holdings, business shares, investments, and assets, totaling $40 million, I leave in full and permanent ownership to my only son, Ethan Harper." The words struck the room like a thunderclap. For a second, the silence was total, heavy and absolute. My breath caught in my chest. I had expected something. A small portion, maybe, but not this. Not everything. Vanessa's chair screeched as she lurched forward, her voice sharp and desperate. "What? That cannot be right. There must be a mistake." The lawyer lowered the page, his eyes meeting hers with professional calm. "Mrs. Harper, I assure you, these are Mr. Harper's final instructions, signed and witnessed legally 3 months prior to his passing." Her jaw tightened, but she slammed her palm against the table. "No, he promised me security. He told me I would be the one to carry on his legacy. You expect me to believe he gave all of it to this boy?" She spat the word like it was venom. My mother sat straighter, her jaw set in quiet triumph, but she said nothing. Uncle Robert, however, leaned forward, his voice even but edged with satisfaction. "Michael was a man of clarity, Vanessa. If this is what he wrote, this is what he meant. He trusted his son." Vanessa turned her fury on me, her eyes blazing. "You think you deserve this? You were barely around. You let him down more times than you can count. He told me things, Ethan. He said you were not ready. He said you lacked his discipline. I met her glare without flinching. For years I had let her words sink into me. But not now. Not after hearing my father's final judgment. I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice steady. He may have doubted me at times, but in the end, he trusted me. That was his choice, not yours. Her hands trembled against the table. You manipulated him. That is the only explanation. He would never— Her voice broke off, the words choking in her throat. She turned back to the lawyer. Read it again. There must be some hidden clause, some condition. The lawyer cleared his throat. There are no conditions. The estate belongs entirely to Mr. Ethan Harper. Those were your husband's explicit instructions. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. Vanessa's face collapsed, her mask of elegance shattering into raw panic.
She pressed a hand to her forehead, shaking her head in disbelief. This cannot be happening. Inside me, something shifted. For years, I had lived under the shadow of her cruelty, doubting my worth, questioning whether my father saw me as anything more than a burden. But here, in black and white, his faith in me was undeniable. It was not just money, it was his trust, his recognition, his final lesson. I looked at my uncle, his eyes shone with quiet pride. He gave me a small nod as if to say, "This is the man Michael raised." My mother placed a hand on mine, her grip strong. She whispered, "He believed in you, all along." Vanessa's voice rose again, desperate and ragged. "I will challenge this. I will take it to court. You cannot just hand everything to him and leave me with scraps." The lawyer's expression remained calm. "You are entitled to pursue legal action, Mrs. Harper, but this will is airtight. Your husband was very deliberate in protecting his son's inheritance." Vanessa's fury twisted into something darker, her words spitting out like broken glass. "You think you won, Ethan. Money will not make you strong. You will fail, and when you do, you will wish you had me to guide you." I stood then, no longer willing to sit in the chair that had bound me in silence. My voice cut through the tension, clear and unwavering. "No, Vanessa, I do not need your guidance. My father believed in me, and that is more powerful than anything you could ever take away." Her face went pale, her lips trembling, but she had no reply. She slumped back into her chair, her fury collapsing into silence. The lawyer gathered the documents, his task complete. That concludes the reading of the will. His words marked the end of more than just a legal process. They marked the end of Vanessa's reign over me, the end of her cruel whispers, the end of her power. As I stood in that room, the weight of $40 million resting on my shoulders, I realized the inheritance was not just about wealth. It was about vindication. My father had seen me, trusted me, and chosen me. For years, I had doubted it, but now I carried the undeniable proof. Vanessa sat frozen, her silence louder than her threats. My mother and uncle stood beside me, their presence a shield against her glare. I walked toward the door, each step lighter than the last. Before I left, I turned back to Vanessa one final time. "You were right about one thing, Vanessa. He made a choice, but it was not the choice you wanted. It was the choice that showed who he truly trusted, and it was not you." Her eyes burned with rage, but there was nothing left for her to say. The will had spoken. I stepped out into the hallway, breathing deeply for the first time since I had entered the office. My father's legacy was now mine, but more than that, his belief in me was carved into stone. Vanessa could never take that away. Walking out of that office felt like stepping into a new life. The air outside was crisp, and for the first time in years, I felt I could breathe without the weight of Vanessa's presence pressing down on me. The will had been read, the verdict had been given, and the truth was undeniable.
My father had trusted me. His empire, his legacy, his fortune, all of it was in my hands now. But what mattered most was not the money. It was about vindication. My father had seen me, trusted me, and chosen me. For years I had doubted it, but now I had the undeniable proof. Vanessa sat frozen, her silence louder than her threats. My mother and uncle stood beside me, their presence a shield against her glare. I walked toward the door, each step lighter than the last. Before I left, I turned back to Vanessa one final time. You were right about one thing, Vanessa. He made a choice, but it was not the choice you wanted. It was the choice that showed who he truly trusted, and it was not you. Her eyes burned with rage, but there was nothing left for her to say. The will had spoken. I stepped out into the hallway, breathing deeply for the first time since I had entered the office. My father's legacy was now mine, but more than that, his belief in me was carved into stone. Vanessa could never take that away. Walking out of that office felt like stepping into a new life. The air outside was crisp, and for the first time in years, I felt I could breathe without the weight of Vanessa's presence pressing down on me. The will had been read, the verdict had been given, and the truth was undeniable. My father had trusted me. His empire, his legacy, his fortune, all of it was in my hands now. But what mattered most was not the money. It was about vindication. My father had seen me, trusted me, and chosen me. For years I had doubted it, but now I had the undeniable proof. Vanessa sat frozen, her silence louder than her threats. My mother and uncle stood beside me, their presence a shield against her glare. I walked toward the door, each step lighter than the last. Before I left, I turned back to Vanessa one final time. You were right about one thing, Vanessa. He made a choice, but it was not the choice you wanted. It was the choice that showed who he truly trusted, and it was not you. Her eyes burned with rage, but there was nothing left for her to say. The will had spoken. I stepped out into the hallway, breathing deeply for the first time since I had entered the office. My father's legacy was now mine, but more than that, his belief in me was carved into stone. Vanessa could never take that away. Walking out of that office felt like stepping into a new life. The air outside was crisp, and for the first time in years, I felt I could breathe without the weight of Vanessa's presence pressing down on me. The will had been read, the verdict had been given, and the truth was undeniable. My father had trusted me. His empire, his legacy, his fortune, all of it was in my hands now. But what mattered most was not the money. It was about vindication. My father had seen me, trusted me, and chosen me. For years I had doubted it, but now I had the undeniable proof. Vanessa sat frozen, her silence louder than her threats. My mother and uncle stood beside me, their presence a shield against her glare. I walked toward the door, each step lighter than the last. Before I left, I turned back to Vanessa one final time. You were right about one thing, Vanessa. He made a choice, but it was not the choice you wanted. It was the choice that showed who he truly trusted, and it was not you. Her eyes burned with rage, but there was nothing left for her to say. The will had spoken. I stepped out into the hallway, breathing deeply for the first time since I had entered the office. My father's legacy was now mine, but more than that, his belief in me was carved into stone. Vanessa could never take that away. Walking out of that office felt like stepping into a new life. The air outside was crisp, and for the first time in years, I felt I could breathe without the weight of Vanessa's presence pressing down on me. The will had been read, the verdict had been given, and the truth was undeniable. My father had trusted me. His empire, his legacy, his fortune, All of it was in my hands now. But what mattered most was not the money. It was about vindication. My father had seen me, trusted me, and chosen me. For years I had doubted it, but now I had the undeniable proof. Vanessa sat frozen, her silence louder than her threats. My mother and uncle stood beside me, their presence a shield against her glare. I walked toward the door, each step lighter than the last. Before I left, I turned back to Vanessa one final time. You were right about one thing, Vanessa. He made a choice, but it was not the choice you wanted. It was the choice that showed who he truly trusted, and it was not you. Her eyes burned with rage, but there was nothing left for her to say. The will had spoken. I stepped out into the hallway, breathing deeply for the first time since I had entered the office. My father's legacy was now mine, but more than that, his belief in me was carved into stone. Vanessa could never take that away. Walking out of that office felt like stepping into a new life. The air outside was crisp, and for the first time in years, I felt I could breathe without the weight of Vanessa's presence pressing down on me. The will had been read, the verdict had been given, and the truth was undeniable. My father had trusted me. His empire, his legacy, his fortune, all of it was in my hands now. But what mattered most was not the money. It was about vindication. My father had seen me, trusted me, and chosen me. For years I had doubted it, but now I had the undeniable proof. Vanessa sat frozen, her silence louder than her threats. My mother and uncle stood beside me, their presence a shield against her glare. I walked.
Wealth reveals character. He had been right. I saw people more clearly than I ever had before. But the most important realization was this: I no longer lived in Vanessa's shadow. For years, she had defined how I saw myself. Every insult, every smirk, every whispered threat had dug into my self-worth. Now her power was gone, and with it the lie that I was insignificant. When I visited my father's grave the following week, I stood in silence for a long time before speaking. You trusted me, Dad. I won't waste it. I'll honor what you built, and I'll make sure no one ever says your son wasn't strong enough. It wasn't just a promise to him. It was a promise to myself. The lesson I took from that day was simple but powerful. People will try to convince you that you are small, that you do not belong, that you cannot stand on your own. If you listen to them, you hand them your strength. But if you trust yourself, if you remember who you are and where you come from, no one can erase you. Vanessa thought she had already won. She thought she could rewrite my father's legacy and strip me of my place in his story. But in the end, the truth stood taller than her lies. My father believed in me. That belief is what I carry forward, more valuable than any number in a bank account. And that is why I smiled when the lawyer read that final sentence. If you found this story powerful, make sure to like the video so more people can see it. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. Leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done if you were in my place. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat.